Back in August of 2020, I released a series of videos in which I talked about some fantastic intellectual properties from the 80s that had some potential to increase in value. And as we move deeper into 2021, we are starting to see some of those properties increase in value. Now, I'm certainly not saying that I had any type of crystal ball, because the truth of the matter is that comics and collectibles as a whole are starting to go up in value. But I did recognize that what is old becomes new again. And so I recognize that some of these great nostalgic things that many of us grew up with in the 80s were poised for a return. There is, however, one additional property that I've identified from the 80s that hasn't necessarily seen the explosive growth that we've seen with other things like G.I. Joe and Transformers. Comic books associated with both of those properties have increased substantially in value. And it doesn't matter which of the two you're talking about, both of them are seeing values north of $1,300-$1,500, and in some cases upwards of $2,000 for some of these books, especially at a 9.8 for issue number 1. But again, in this video, what we are going to do is to take a look at one additional property that has the same potential but hasn't necessarily exploded just yet. Stay tuned for the video. If you were a kid in the 80s in the US, there was no way you escaped the phenomenon of G.I. Joe and Transformers, right? Those two went hand in hand with one another. But there was a third that really jumps out at me and may jump out at you as well. And I am specifically talking about
He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
As soon as I start talking about He-Man, I get nostalgic all over again, because I had the characters, He-Man and Skeletor, Battle Cat, and I also had Castle Grayskull, right? So this takes me right back to my youth, and it might take it back for you as well.
By the power of Grayskull.
In this video, what I want to do is to highlight a couple of the key books that I was able to find in my collection. And by and large, just about every book that is a He-Man book is almost a key, because there really aren't that many of them. There are two series that we are going to talk about. The very first series actually came out in 1982, and this was actually a limited series of only 3 issues. And thankfully, I actually have doubles of all 3 issues in that first limited series run. Starting off with this one right here, Masters of the Universe, issue number 1. This book actually has an FMV at a 9.8 of $325. And again, this is nothing. This is nothing compared to the values that are being seen with G.I. Joe number 1 and also Transformers issue number 1. Both of those books are sky high in comparison to what we just looked at for Masters of the Universe. Next up, we have issue number 2, and I actually do need to rebag and bore all of these. Issue number 2 actually has an FMV of only $130 at a 9.8. And again, it may also have some potential as well to go up in value, just like some of the other issues of G.I. Joe and Transformers. And then the very last book in this limited series run is a really awesome yellow cover. This is, of course, issue number 3 that has an FMV at a 9.8 of $110. All of these FMV prices are based out of Go Collect. So that is essentially the first series of G.I. Joe that dropped. I don't know how widely popular these books were printed, but again, I'm very thankful to have found multiple copies of 1 through 3 in the collection. So next up, I want to talk about the ongoing series that was released in 1986. And the ongoing series did not run for all that long, to be completely honest. It went for about 13 issues. And I actually have a healthy number of those issues. I remain hopeful that I'm going to find some of the others in the collection whenever I get a chance to go digging for them. We're going to start things off with issue number 1, Masters of the Universe. This cover takes me again right back to my childhood. This pose right here is imprinted in my mind, and I've actually been reading both the limited series and this series, just trying to relive my childhood. But this book right here at a 9.8 has an FMV of around $210. There have been some recent sales in excess of about $300, but again, the FMV is about $210. And I was fortunate enough to find multiple copies of this in the collection. And again, just a really, really cool cover right there for issue number 1. Next up is issue number 2, and I was able to find 2 copies of that in the collection. Issues 2 through 4 roughly have an FMV of somewhere between $90 and about $110, so nothing crazy there. And you may be able to, again, find copies of this in your collection already. You may be able to find nice raw copies to that point. Here are 4 copies of issue number 3, and I want to say that this one was priced around $110 at FMV at a 9.8, I do believe. Next, I have issue number 4, and you will readily recognize that this is one of the 25th anniversary books. You can see with the border right there, and I am actually working on pulling together at some point maybe a full run of these 25th anniversary books. We will see whether I can make that magic happen, but again, issue number 4 in multiple copies. Next, we have issue number 5, and this book has an FMV of around $230. And what's really cool with this book is that it's still pretty white. A lot of these books from the 80s tend to have a little bit of a yellow tone to them if they're a white cover, but these two appear to be pretty solid in their sharpness of that white. So very pleased about that. I'm actually going to skip issue 6 because I do not have it, or at least I have not found it, but I do have issue number 7, really awesome yellow cover right there if I can move my mitt out of the way. And this book has an FMV of around $190 at a 9.8. And then the very last book that I'll show you is issue number 10. I do not have issue number 9, but I do have 10, and you can see a color difference between these 2 books in the blues, and I think that's really just a reflection of the printer running a little low on one of the colors when this book was printed versus that one. I don't think that it's going to have any impact on the value of this book, but at present, a 9.8 of issue number 10 has an FMV of around $475. I will tell you, the most expensive book in the entire run is issue number 9, and that book has an FMV of around $1,300. And I have not dug into the details to understand why it has such a high FMV, but indeed it does. And then I do not have issues 11, 12, or 13. I am hopeful that I will find those in the collection because I think it's in issue 12 that we have the death of He-Man, and then issue number 13 that we have the death of Skeletor. And I do believe that that issue 13, last one in the run, is a pretty scarce book. So fingers crossed that I'll be able to find that book in the collection. So again, a lot of the books and intellectual property from the 80s are starting to heat up. Transformers and G.I. Joe are doing incredibly well. We just learned that Lady J is going to have a series that's going to be coming out, I think, on one of the streaming platforms. There is the potential for some things to happen with both Transformers and G.I. Joe, and that bodes well maybe for the property known as Masters of the Universe. So if you have a chance to go looking for these books, this could be a great opportunity ahead. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this video up. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, I definitely want to encourage you to hit the thumbs up button and leave a comment behind. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, I definitely want to encourage you to do that. That way you can stay abreast of all the content that gets released from the channel, and it also makes you eligible for the various giveaways that I do every single week. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care. I should probably also show you this book as well. And this is the only He-Man related book that I have in my collection that is slabbed. It is not necessarily an inexpensive book, but it is a book that has some potential and goes right along with the ones that I just showed you. This is DC Comics Presents issue number 47, and this is the first appearance of He-Man and Skeletor in comics. And this happens to be a 9.6 with white pages, again, that I was fortunate enough to find in the collection, was able to send it to CGC and got it back graded, but a very, very cool book to have in the collection. So there you go. Wanted to make sure that I showed you that before I closed out this video.